Okay, thanks for hanging with us through the end of the afternoon. I hope this last discussion will be worth it because in many ways it's sort of the culmination of what we've been talking about throughout the day. And this idea of an opt-in economy really plays into the notion of a very consumer-driven experience. So what happens if we really start moving away from the anonymized, passive opt-in that we've always had, and as we've already heard in the last panel, this notion that the traditional compact between advertisers, publishers, and users has in many ways been broken over the last few years, in part by the ad technology itself. What happens when we start moving towards users taking greater control, not only of their data, but of their permission, and opting into certain services? To some degree, the media makes this imperative. As the media itself becomes more personal, more intimate, we become less tolerant of a classic and a traditional interruptive approach. So what does opt-in really mean? What shape could it take? What would that ad economy look like? Let me ask Alan Chappell to come back to the stage and bring his panel with him. I've already introduced him. Please welcome again Alan Chappell.
Thanks, Steve. So I want to start off by saying I reserve the right to contradict every single thing that I said about an hour ago. In the interest of good content and good fun. Hey, thanks for sticking it out. I think this is going to be a really interesting discussion. The prep calls, for me personally, were really interesting. So I'm going to ask each panelist to, in 30 seconds or less, introduce themselves, just so you guys get a sense of where everybody's coming from.
Yeah, so I'm Alex Groth. I'm the CEO of Gladly, a bit of an outsider on this panel, but we have an ad blocker, but at our core, we're really trying to figure out how we can serve ads that consumers really enjoy. So we're really trying to get at kind of what that last panel was talking about, but almost ads as an experience as opposed to ads as an intrusion.
I'm Alexander Uveroff. I'm with Rosetta, which is part of Razorfish Global. I have spent probably more time of my work career as a client than as an agency person. But I work with Red Bull and Anheuser-Busch, also work for big holding companies, but have worked in the capacity of media, digital, as well as analytics.
Hi, everybody who's left. I'm Mike Parker. I'm president for the Western U.S. for iCrossing, relatively new to iCrossing, about 9 months now. iCrossing is a full-service digital agency, really known for performance marketing, so a lot of history in search and media, and now full-service digital agency.
I am Adam Seymour, not Tia Shaw, despite what your program says, but I do play her on stage. That was not funny, huh? So, I know, right? So I'm with Cara San Francisco, managing director. We're a full-service media agency. Specific focus on audience insights, but work across sort of the gamut of media from strategy all the way through to execution.
Okay, welcome, guys. So the first step in solving any problem is perhaps admitting that there's a problem. And so as we look into the current digital ad world and we look how things are going to develop over the next 5 years, is there something broken here? If what are the things that are broken right now about digital advertising? And Alex, sort of representing the ad blocking contingent, I'll let you start, and then we'll just go down the line.
Yeah, so absolutely, I think on the consumer side, there's a lot of problems within digital advertising. But actually, a surprising stance for me, maybe, I don't think that all of digital advertising is broken. For some good examples, Facebook and Google, a lot of it is based on relevancy, and those sites have really done a good job of incorporating ads into the experience that the user has, such that when you're doing a Google search and you see a search ad, you really aren't that taken out of the experience of finding what you're looking for, and a lot of times they can be helpful. So, I mean, the way we see it is for a lot of the banner ads that exist online, it's absolutely broken. Users aren't clicking on them. Banner blindness has been a thing long before ad blockers came around. You're just really not reaching people in those situations. But there are definitely platforms now that are coming along that have integrated the user experience with the ads as well, and those are really being successful, I think.
I look at where we are at the moment in the digital space far more as I think as a consumer. And if I take my agency hat off and I look at it, and when I get online and I go to my web experience, has become a very, very poor experience. And I think that when we look at why this has happened, I think it's very easy to understand how the industry, from an efficiency standpoint and looking to generate revenue, has pushed itself to the situation. But I see that where we are at the moment, yes, it's broken. I think the industry is probably more caught a cold than anything else. I think in the long term, in the next 5 years, I think it'll sort of sort itself out. But I see it at this second in time being, until we fix that consumer experience, the industry is going to keep hurting itself. But the way that I look at it is like a child sitting in a life raft. It's all of a sudden, candy over this side of the life raft, and child runs over, and all of a sudden it turns over. So at some point they need to sort of step back a little bit. So not a good analogy, but analogy all the same.
I've not heard that one before. Yeah, I don't know if the industry's broken. We certainly have our challenges. I think sometimes we are really hard on ourselves because it's all really pretty new still and changing so fast. So, we got it all wrong, we fucked it all up. I mean, I don't subscribe to that. I subscribe more to a point of view that things are changing very rapidly and we need to stay ahead of things and continue to evolve. I think also there's so much money in our business so quickly, so much pressure from VCs or startup companies to find product and find audience and find money, that we get this kind of gold rush mentality a little bit in our industry, and we've had it since the beginning of, oh, look, maybe there's an opportunity over there, let's go do that. And then somebody's got to be even more extreme than that to try to get out in front of those guys. So I think we tend to, I don't know if we're a child in a boat with candy, but we do tend to hurt ourselves, a lot of times where there's no voice to sort of step back as an industry and sort of go, well, wait a minute, is that exactly what we should be doing? And I think the third one for me of late is really just, obviously the rise of mobile in the last few years, where so much of the advertising experience, so much of digital marketing engagement for brands is now on the mobile platform, which has introduced a whole new set of variables. I mean, I think when you think back to, if you were around like maybe some of us in the earlier days of banners and digital advertising, and we had pop-ups and all kinds of interstitials and all kinds of crazy shit, that was a terrible experience. And eventually we weeded that stuff out. And I feel like we're kind of going through a similar cycle with mobile right now. Hey, everybody's on mobile, I got to be on mobile. What's the opportunity to engage consumers on mobile? And then actually when you think about the experience, whether it's slow loading or I don't think I've ever clicked on a mobile banner, but someplace there's data point that says I've clicked on thousands because I can't stop myself from clicking on and so forth. So I think there's stuff that we got to work through on that front too.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with a lot of what these guys said. It seems to me like we're in need of an optimization, I guess, of the advertising experience. I mean, you were referring to banners, and you remember like when we had pop-ups and we had little 468 by 60s and 88 by 31s, and we got bigger banners and we got bigger buttons and bigger skyscrapers, and that was kind of the solution. I do think there's an interesting question to be asked of, like, why does the internet have banners? Like, how did it start this way? That doesn't have to be the ad experience, and there are other ideas out there. I think you're starting to see the emergence of some of those. The native stuff that's happening is really cool. I think it sucks when you click on like 10 awful plastic surgeries and then you get to the page and you have to keep tabbing through and going from page to page to page. Or I just want a list. I just want the 10 bad plastic surgeries. I think we can all name them. But just tab through it, have those, and like it's not a great experience for a consumer, so that sucks when I'm a consumer. But the consumer is getting that content for free, so there is a value exchange, and I think that conversation also needs to be part of the dialogue. Like, why is this free? What are you giving up in exchange? And that hasn't been made clear. And then the ad opportunities really don't meet the consumer's need, and I think that needs to be made clear as well. It seems to me like with the emergence of mobile, with the population that's consuming media on digital channels has grown so quickly, we just started rushing in with new ad opportunities and ways to monetize it. And we do need to take a step back and say, what is the right way to do this? And that encompasses a million things in terms of measurement, ad format, yada, yada, yada. But it's an optimization, I think, that's needed.
So the plastic surgery example is sort of a great one. And I get from the perspective that you as a user want to see all 10 botched jobs in a row. But as a practical matter, if you're a publisher in this industry, you can't make enough. And I'm not here to debate what enough is, but it would seem like you can certainly make more if you have 10 clicks that serve 10 ads. And therefore, you can sort of keep the lights on.
Right, and is it worth it for me as a consumer to say, yes, I will pay or I will go through this experience just so I can see these 10 botched plastic surgeries to get these 10 ads? And is that clear in my mind? From a consumer standpoint, the answer is no. But that's not a great experience. So I click on one of those once, and then I'm like, oh, I'm just going to be let down again. So the next time I see 12 plastic surgeries, I'm just like, ugh, I don't want to click. So I don't know. Maybe that content shouldn't be up there.
Well, and maybe. It doesn't seem like consumers are willing to pay for third and fourth tier content. But see, when I look at the industry, I think that it's funny that I'm going to give you the same answer regarding what's great about digital advertising and what's horribly broken, and it's the fragmentation. It's because fragmentation does not beget anything resembling accountability. And so when you can't point to why this ad or why this experience is the way it is, you just know that the totality of the cacophony of noise that we've created here, it just naturally makes for a poor experience. Now, the flip side of that is that, again, a lot of those same companies are responsible for a certain amount of innovation within the space and a certain amount of very positive things going on in the space. But as a consumer, collectively, man, it's a drag. So how does this, so we identified a couple of different challenges, and I'm going to start with Mike this time, just sort of for the heck of it.
Because my name doesn't start with the letter A.
It doesn't
like
start
all the
with
rest
A,
of you.
and yet, my brother's name is Mike, and it was his birthday yesterday, so anyway, so you came to mind.
Strangely, it was my birthday yesterday.
You were
April 5th.
really?
Totally true story.
Wow. So anyway, so what happens if these problems don't get solved? Like, what does this look like? I mean, to me, every time that it feels like it can't get worse, it does. So like, what happens? Let's play this out over the next couple of years. The problems that we're identifying, fragmentation and other issues. Well, what happens if we don't solve them?
Well, the money goes away, I think, is part of the answer. I guess two sides of it, right? On one side, the consumer goes away, and on the other side, the money goes away. So I think hopefully it will get solved because those are two pretty powerful forces. I think for me, I think a lot of the brand marketers today, and certainly a lot of us as their agency representatives, I would like to see us have more courage, right? I think one of the challenges is there are many things that we are well aware of. You go to panel after panel or you read article after article. It's no mystery that there are issues with ad fraud and click fraud. There are no mystery, issues around mobile experience or whatever. You go through, most people are aware of this stuff. My part of my question is, well, why aren't we voting with our money then? Why aren't we voting with our media plans? And having big marketers, having agencies that represent their spend say, look, I'm not going to just keep going along with momentum and keep doing that because I guess that's what you sort of do, and just say, look, no more of that. I won't buy that. And I think we're starting to see some of that. But I think if we don't, obviously we're going to get into some discussion of ad blockers, I guess, but that is a symptom, right? And there will be others like that where if the experience is bad, consumers will vote, and the dollars will vote also.
Any of the other agencies see that happening, or disagree with that?
No, I mean, I completely agree with that. I mean, in reality, it is that sort of financial Darwinism that's taking place. That is, at some point, people are just either going to use a pop-up blocker or an ad blocker, or just ignore the advertising. And it's just one of those things that if it doesn't have any effectiveness, then people are going to start shying away from it, or people are going to be looking to different media or whatever it may be. So yeah, at some point, it's sort of hitting that inflection point where it's just like, okay, no more. I don't think it'll be overnight people will change, but I do think that people will start stepping back from where we go. And I think when we look at, a number of web properties, which have considerable integrity, and see where they have gone as far as the consumer experience. It takes me back to sort of 2000, when there was the sort of interstitials and pop-ups and pop-unders and all the other bits and pieces that went on, and how we looked upon them with absolute disdain. And now when I look at some of these practices, it is on some of these, these larger, properties that do have that integrity. And you understand why. You look at the most tech-savvy, you look at the millennials, where we're all trying to reach out to, and see why they're doing what they're doing. So at some point, it is, again, just that sort of financial reality, that Darwinism, that things have to change, or things have to.
I think there's an interesting point here about the pop-up blockers, which we've all kind of mentioned as a previous history that we've kind of evolved from. Looking back at that, it wasn't publishers or really agencies that pushed that. It was browsers deciding that pop-ups are no longer going to be allowed, right? Google Chrome released an update, and suddenly no pop-up ads show up. So you're not going to buy a pop-up ad because you can't reach anyone. I think that's very much kind of what's happening with, even looking at the interstitial ads on the, 17 great tricks to eat chips or whatever. You might see 17 ads, but no one's clicking on them, right? So at some point, that money is going to go away. I think we're all in agreement there that that's going to start causing this change to really focus on user experience and engagement.
Right, but if the cost for your content is next to zero, you don't have a lot of upside that you need to make on the ads. And so the chip example, I think, is one of those things where, how much does that content actually cost?
Right, but are those ads
79 cents for a bag of chips.
Are those ads even worth 79 cents? Right?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah, I think we focus a lot on content. So this is all theoretical because it's not actual, but we try to do our media planning and our content planning with our clients at the same time. And the reason I say it's theoretical, those conversations are starting to happen. We're starting to do that with certain clients that are a little bit leaner or a little bit more or less sort of hierarchical. It's hard because there's a shift in sort of how our clients have to plan, the stakeholders on their side, if we're working with a media client versus a strategy client versus a content client. But we try to look at the advertising and the content together, and then we try as much as possible to bring content out as sort of a form of advertising. I think we're fortunate we have some brands that really have content that resonates with the consumer. But a big part of our plan is reach and frequency, right? Like, we're trying to build reach and frequency really quickly, and we're trying to get dollars from TV. Sometimes those plans end up heavily, laden with banners and boxes and, videos in interstitials, and then we get a viewability report that says 50% weren't viewable or whatever the metric is. It's usually a little higher for us, I hope. But, what's the value of it, right? Like, you have to ask yourself that. If you're looking at reach and frequency, it didn't deliver that. But I think there's another side to it which we have to explore is, what is the value of that? Are you trying to build reach and frequency, or are you trying to shift perception, for example? And is there a consistent measure of perception out there that everyone can get behind and report on? When we do reporting, we get asked questions on, well, how many impressions we still get asked how many clicks did it deliver? And those are the wrong questions to be asking, but if those are the constant questions being asked, it's going to perpetuate itself. So there has to be that shift, but it's happening, just not as fast, I think, as we'd like.
Yeah, I do sort of look at our industry and scratch my head and see where we've got, and I see that, ad blindness has come to the point where I heard the analogy that you're more likely to survive a plane crash in the middle of the Atlantic than you are to actually click on a banner ad. And I just thought, oh my goodness me, it is, when you're looking at 0.00 click-through rates, it's just sort of to a point where it's got, it's, and I like your point as far as, why do we use the banner sizes do we use? Why are we using, these? Because they just don't work. If it was anything else where you got 0.00 click-through rates on something else, we wouldn't do it.
Okay, so we've identified some problems. We've kind of walked through, how it can potentially get worse. But I want to focus on solutions. And so the focus of this panel was, okay, let's look at 2021, and let's assume we're in an opt-in world. And so, does an affirmative consent model solve the issues that we're talking about today? Alexander, we'll start with you.
I sort of gave you the face that I had no idea. But anyway, it's like
when the teacher picks you up.
Yeah.
It all fell apart there a bit.
It's always the student who looks down that the teacher calls on.
Listen, coming back to your point, I think you articulate it very eloquently in your presentation that an overall opt-in it just becomes too complex, and I think by trying to generate enough rope to fly our kite, we're going to end up hanging ourselves, I think, at the end of it. And I think that that sort of global opt-in is something that again, you run into the data issues as far as, okay, you've opted in, so certain people can then have complete access to your data. And I think that as we go forward over the next 5 years, and as we all start spieling off a lot more data, I think that we're going to end up getting ourselves into trouble. If at this point in time we say, okay, opt into everything, then I think we're going to regret it in 5, 6, 7 years, and I'm not sure it's the way forward.
So the friends of mine who didn't have the good fortune to stumble over ass backwards into the digital space 20 years ago, when I go and talk to them and have a beer, college friends, they'll say, well, yeah, they would say something like this. Well, why don't we just set up an opt-in regime? Because if you have to get people to opt in, maybe you'll stop making crappy ads. Is there any truth to that?
Well, there's the opt-ins of what? What are you going to be opting into? I mean, what is going to be what
would be the mechanism?
Well, no, it's more you're going to be opting in, but are you opting in everything? Are you opting in all your data? Is it, what can they do when you check that box?
You'd make a hell of a lawyer, Alexander.
Well, I think it goes back to, right, like, there has to be that conversation. There needs to be more acknowledgement of the content that we're getting is free because of the advertising, right? I think that's where that conversation has to start. I talk to a lot of friends, too, who work in education or finance, and they don't really get that, right? They don't get that ad model. When you explain, like, oh, yeah, of course, I get that. But that conversation, I think, needs to happen. But then also, as a brand, like, I want to produce content and ads that my consumers want to see, right? Like, that has to be a focus. Like, why would I want to put a crappy ad out there? So I think that needs to happen regardless. I don't know if it's an opt-in thing. I mean, to a degree, Facebook is opt-in, that walled garden aspect, and our advertising is really effective there, and we've scaled it over the years. So there might be a kind of, solution that's already happening organically, but I don't know, maybe ad blockers aren't so bad. Like, I don't really love a lot of digital ads.
Come on, ad blockers, I'm sorry Mark's not here, but I just have absolute disdain that they are strong-arming the industry, and I don't think in the fullness of time that they will be around, but I just see the role they're playing at this point in time is, I don't think that's a solution for the long term.
Well,
Maybe a catalyst to short-term change, though?
Maybe.
Yes.
Well, let me play a little devil's advocate here. I mean, there are a number of different entities in this room who are exploiting the way the digital ad ecosystem works in order to generate a profit. They're exploiting the breakage. They're exploiting consumers' misunderstanding about how the internet actually works. And so aren't ad blockers just exploiting a broken
Not all
system?
ad blockers. I mean, just coming on to Ad Blocker Plus, where they step in and say, "Listen, I have high moral integrity, and what we should be doing is we should be doing this, and we are." We are the halo on the crown of what advertising should be, and then end up just sort of strong-arming funds out of other people. I mean, if you're an ad blocker there and you want to put together a product which delivers the removal of ads, then that's fine. But it's when you become something that has a model that's built behind it, which is about, I don't know, generating some form of revenue. I just think when it's one of those things, it's sort of, I haven't got a good analogy here, but it's just like when you see it, you know what it is. And I think in this case, I look at ad Block Plus, and I'm just not convinced it's.
I think, Alan, my question is, if we're talking about data, right? So as an industry, I think we're on a reasonably steady march to better understand consumers and therefore provide more targeted message, more relevant message, and so forth, because that works for both parties. You get an ad that makes more sense to you, and I get more value because I've spent my money someplace that makes sense, right? So I think that's a positive march forward that we continue down towards, and that hopefully improves the effectiveness of the whole ecosystem for everybody. I think within that, though, if that's all predicated on data, and I'm going to want more and more data about you, And so then you say, well, we get into privacy concerns. So if the opt-in is around, okay, I understand what's going to be in it for me, and I'm going to opt in so you can use my data, that's one thing. But a blanket opt-in to receive advertising, let's say, right? You know, like turning your pop-up blocker off or on, let's say on your browser, if you sort of use that as a broad analogy, like I can turn ads off or on. So on comes with implicit statement of some kind, and I've turned on an ad, you know, I've opted into advertising. I don't know how that improves the quality of advertising. I guess if you would say, well, the whole industry is going to get together and realize we need to make better advertising so more consumers are willing to turn that on. But I don't know that we think as a collective in the same way. So I don't know what a broad opt-in does to improve ad quality.
Yeah, I'd love to jump in here on a couple points. One, first on the data point. Obviously, through all the panels today, we've talked about how important data is, and I think it's important to not lose sight of why is this data important. And ultimately, it's to be able to deliver a relevant ad. And relevance is kind of a tricky word to define, right? There's a temporal component. There's, you know, is this person willing to look at an ad right now? And that's something we're focused in on the opt-in side of, okay, we can get the temporal component of relevance just by basically putting a wall between the user and an ad and only letting them see an ad when they want to. So I think that looking at data as this like necessary food that will fuel everything going forward is a little bit short-sighted in that there are a lot of different ways to get to that relevance. You know, Google Search is a great example. They can do a ton of relevancy without collecting these massive amounts of personal data. Sure, they do. I mean, obviously they have an amazing data stack behind it, but there's a lot of different ways to get to that same answer other than collecting, you know, mass amounts of user data.
Yeah, and I would just, you know, I've been doing this a while now, and I just wonder, you know, the goal is to get to that, you know, wonderfully relevant ad. You know, we have, I don't know, 100 times as much data now as we did 10 years ago. Are we really any closer to that relevant ad? I'm probably kind of veering off topic for the panel, but that's sort of where we've landed here. I mean, is all this data really helping?
I mean, I would say to a degree, yes, to the degree you can mine it, but there's also, I mean, we see it every day with clients, this sort of data overload, right? And it's focusing on the wrong metrics or what's the story that is being told through the data. That we're not seeing come out as cleanly. I think if you can get to a place where you have the right objective in place and the right strategy in place, you have the right measures in place, and you only focus on that and you really hone your data in on that, you get to a much better place and you start producing relevant ads. When we see partners that deliver high degree of non-viewable ads, we don't advertise on them anymore. If everyone else did that, I would hope that that particular content or publisher or ad network would start to lose revenue, which we have been seeing. So I think there is some stuff organically happening, but you know, there's a lot of data overload happening too.
Yeah, and I think there's still, you know, the field of data science is what, 5 years old, really? And I think there's a whole bunch of insights that are you know, we're still trying to figure out.
But I think it's a very good point. I mean, we have generated all of this data, sort of tenfold. You know, from an efficiency standpoint, your ads, you know, are being targeted a little more. But when we look at our click-through rates and everything else, they have still, you know, moved south. I mean, they would have moved south even quicker. But I do think that that's, you know, an interesting point of view to say that, you know, I don't think we have found the holy grail yet. And I think that, you know, industry does need to go through a number of sort of rebirths, I think, before we find something that really does have some more chops. And it moves us out of the infancy, because I think, I can't remember who it was. I mean, the digital industry is still, you know, it's still a baby, it's still young. I mean, you know, the Earth started billions of years ago. You know, people say, oh, it's 10 years, 15, 20 years old. You know, in reality, it's still very, very early days. So it is these, you know, these stumbling mistakes that go on, and the, you know, optimization and the changes of the industry that we will see and go through.
All right, so if we all agree that opt-in isn't going to solve the things that are broken about the digital advertising industry, it sort of begs the question, okay, well, if you ran the world, or you ran the digital media world anyway, what would you do to fix what's broken?
Well, I kind of come back to the point I made before. I think we need some more courage, right? I think we need some more leadership and some more disruption from leaders to start to put their foot down, right? And when big advertisers with big dollars or agencies that are spending those or advising on how they're spending start to say, look, we're just not going to do that, you know, that will start to force change fast, because when the money's not there, people will have to react to it. You know, I've had clients in the last couple of years who've said, I won't buy any mobile display. You know, if we're gonna be on mobile, we'll be on native only, because mobile display doesn't work for me, and we don't buy into what's going on there. And you know, when people start to make those type of, you know, philosophical decisions, I think that will have a ton of influence on the industry.
But that in turn begs the question of when and how do we get to that tipping point? I mean, you gave a good example with mobile display, but that's also a bit of a tire fire in many respects. So there's a number of folks that are sort of have moved away, who've moved away from that for any number of reasons, and other advertisers who gravitate towards it. But
I think the other thing too, though, just to jump back in is I mean, I lay up at night thinking about how much Facebook stock I should buy, because you know, the answer right now to just about every question is Facebook, as far as I'm concerned, because it's high quality content, you know, it's lack of fraud, no ad blocking, it's working. You know, the money that we're putting into paid social for a lot of our even our performance marketers is delivering. So I think, and you know, obviously search and now YouTube for Google is performing on a lot of levels. So when you have those types of high quality environments that have rich data, ability to target, good formats, native feed, whatever, good ad products and so on, then the rest of the competition is gonna, like, the dollars are shifting fast. And so it's gonna make everybody else go, oh, what is it about, you know, my property or what I'm doing that's not competing with that, and how do I need to, you know, pull up my socks?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I think these walled garden environments are doing some really interesting things. I think if I had my magic wand, I would say, you know, you're going to have plans that are done the right way in terms of, I mean, remarketing is a perfect example, right, of where it's gone bad. Like, you get 1,000 ads for something when you're not in the right environment or the right mindset. I mean, we all work at agencies or in this business, so you're visiting other websites for other reasons. Like, I have a client who was also working on a swimwear company, so I went to the website, and then I got swimwear ads for the next week and a half, and like, there's no way I'm going to buy it. But those ads just became really irrelevant to me. So there has to be a greater way to deliver relevancy. And then I think the other challenge too is if we're not buying viewable ads, right, the publishers aren't monetizing as much, so they could theoretically charge a higher cost model. Well, no agency is going to accept a higher CPM. No client's going to accept that. So there is that discussion that needs to happen. But there's a lot of stuff going on from a cost model standpoint, from a targeting standpoint, from a data standpoint, that just needs to be openly discussed and accepted that there has to be some sort of seismic change. You can't get a 100% viewable banner that's really impactful for like $3. It just doesn't happen.
But when you look at the cost model, you don't think clients would be willing, if it's from an efficiency standpoint, if it's, I don't know, the unit is more effective and more efficient, that they wouldn't accept that? They wouldn't accept some sort of CPM increase? Or
some clients would, if I had the right data to support that. So I think there are certain advocates or clients out there, and there's some that don't get it. They say, I need my impressions. We have to hit this many impressions because our model says this. And you're like, well, I can do a plan for that, but you know, is that really the right thing to do? So it's having that relationship and having those conversations with your client, I think, which are happening, which is good.
Because I mean, a lot of client pressure that comes from us is that, you know, I need my reach and I need to buy against a certain demo, but it's just like that relevancy, which in many cases is probably not being integrated into the plan to the level that it needs to. And I think in the future that's something that, you know, maybe us as agency people may have to work a little harder at.
So there's been a couple of comments about the effectiveness of ads delivered into the walled gardens environment. Interestingly, those are arguably all opt-in. But let me ask a question. It's how much do the walled gardens environment allow each of you, really more the three guys down at the end, but how do they allow you to rate the efficacy of the media spend independently?
Well, they tell us, right? So it's all good. They tell us that
How do we know it's working? How do we know it's actually performing?
Yeah. Because a couple of people have said it's working, and I'm just, how
Well,
would you know?
We're a more performance-oriented agency, right? So we don't buy a lot of brand perception driving work. We're mostly some kind of outcome, or we're trying to drive subscriber acquisition or sale or what have you. So we're mostly using Facebook for customer acquisition, that type of stuff that's driving to a KPI, and it performs, right? So we look at, in our kind of performance engine stack, we typically will start with search, and then we'll look at maybe some programmatic display, and we'll look at some paid social, and we'll start to tune the dials and see what's driving results. And the paid social, paid Facebook work that we're doing is often driving good response, good result.
Yeah, I mean, Facebook from a performance standpoint is for us is very good. I mean, it's from an awareness, from click-throughs, from everything. I mean, it's certainly a very positive sort of walled in garden, yes, but it is only one tool in many, and it's sort of the bright beacon we have at this point in time. But it's for us it's been great, but it has its limitations.
Yeah, and I would say the same. It depends on what you're using the channels for. So from a performance standpoint, we can look at those metrics when we're looking at awareness or perception. I think the modeling piece is really important. So we do media mix modeling because this can exist as a digital advertising ecosystem as well. We're investing a lot of money across channels. So how does it all work together? What is the role of what we're trying to do? And then we have econometric modeling in place, or ecosystem modeling is a Cara product. We do attribution modeling. It's a little harder on those walled gardens. They don't want to give their data up. But the benefit of a holding company is we have some proprietary relationships with them, but it's having those right measures in place, be they performance measures or the right modeling in place. It takes a long time, though, to get that data back, and it's expensive. So that's another challenge you have with clients that don't want to spend the money.
Yeah, no, the cost it's certainly premium.
So I've sort of asked this question indirectly. I'm going to ask it more directly. From the perspective of an ad blocker, are you more a result of the issues with digital marketing, or are you part of the solution to some of those issues?
I mean, I think both, right? The consumers started using ad blocking because the experience was so poor. And there's many different reasons why. Some people come in from data, some people come from slow loading pages. Some it's just like one pre-roll ad on one site that they see every day. And so consumers were driven to ad blocking, and now I see it as part of the solution, but more than anything, it's what's driving these discussions amongst the ad industry. And this is what needs to happen. This is how this is going to change. It's not just going to be ad blockers that are going to suddenly come up with a new model and get advertisers to come on board, right? They need advertisers to actually make the ads that they're going to whitelist if that's their plan. And so I see it more of a kind of bellwether and reason to start having these discussions, and most importantly, have these discussions from the user point of view. As we're talking about why Facebook is so successful, I can't say this enough. It's because the user experience is fine. I mean, you're on your mobile phone, you're on Facebook, you see ads. I click on Facebook ads. I don't think I've clicked on a banner ad, 10 years, maybe, accident. Those Facebook ads, they're really well done in part of the content, and we're starting to see this can translate to other platforms and can really drive the change. Is focusing on that user experience above everything else.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, I think it's 41% of millennials, 18 to 29s, are now have an ad blocker installed. So, you start throwing out those numbers, and I think it's 1 million new people are downloading ad blockers every week, and it's great to say, we'll address it, it'll be fine, but it really is starting to get its teeth stuck into how we do business, and I think change has to be upon us, and I do think that someone holds my feet to the fire and says, what is the problem? How are we going to resolve it? The reality is, I think it's, there is no silver bullet. There is no, we're going to do this, or we're going to adopt to this, or, I do think it is, just as an industry, there's a number of things that we need to stop doing. And I think that ad blockers, they're not going to go away. They're going to still be here in 5, 7, 10 years, whatever it is. But I do think by that, constant, I guess, pulling back by doing our jobs, or publishers by doing their jobs the way they should be doing it, I think we'll start pulling some of that back and making the environment a lot more productive.
I think we've created a pretty thorny problem, right? Like part of it is the experience and what we've done as an industry, but I think that those of us that are a little older probably grew up with a little clearer understanding of the kind of value exchange of, I get to watch this TV show for free because there's ads, and I get to, whatever media I'm consuming, whatever content I'm consuming, there's this exchange that doesn't cost me anything because they're ads. But you know, when we kind of commercialized the internet and the whole thing was democratized and everything was free, and so all content was free, and we sort of started to create this expectation that stuff is just free. And I think certainly people who are maybe younger who grew up in that context sort of have come to expect that as well, right? So I think there's an interesting conundrum here, right, where if it takes hold to the degree that it seems like it is, and then publishers can't generate ad revenue from their products, their content, their site, then they go out of business, and you know it starts to fall down because people don't go, hey, I'm exchanging, in exchange for seeing these banner ads, in exchange for somehow having advertising or sponsorship or whatever, I get the content. So I think it's intriguing. I think we've done a poor job of an industry trying to understand and articulate that value exchange to consumers, made worse by the fact that the overall ad experience is bad. But I think, you know, some of the publishers that are starting to talk about, look, hey, if you come to my site and you got an ad blocker turned on, your prerogative, you're right, but I'm not going to give you my content for free then, I'm sorry. And we start to, as a whole ecosystem, we start to balance out a clear understanding of who gets what and why, you know.
Yeah, a little bit of a counterpoint to that. We were actually surprised, our own user base, the vast majority of users, the most requested tool when we first launched was the ability to whitelist certain publishers and YouTube creators. So I don't think that value exchange is lost in the millennial generation. I think that's something that I've read a lot about and heard a lot about, but on our own user base, the vast majority of people are whitelisting the sites that they really like. And they're blocking ads on the 80% of sites that they visit, you know, a couple times a week or whatever it may be. But for the creators that they really care about and the ones they've connected with, I think people talked about this earlier on, there's a lot of opportunity for monetization, not just through whitelisting ads, but through other engagement there. I think that millennials, while they do want a lot of things for free, also understand that there are costs, and to have like really great content in a specific area, they know that there is a cost to that. So I would strongly disagree that that's like a huge problem from ad blocking. And I think for a large extent, the conversation about ad blocking has helped kind of solve this problem itself, because as you said, Forbes puts up a big thing, and now people are, you know, more consciously thinking about what their choices are.
But Forbes did it for 30 days only. So as far as, just for Joyce to come back on that, as far as what percentage of people, when you said a great number of them wanted, what is it, 10%, is it 80%?
I think
is it just
for our user base, it's somewhere around 60% of people have whitelisted some sort of site. So yeah, it's very surprising. And it was not at all what we were expecting either.
Okay.
Steve, do you want to start taking questions?
Yeah.
Who do you choose first?
Well, one of the let me ask about the changing nature of the data exchange. One of the things that consumers have become more aware of is the value of their own data, and this has sort of been going on for at least a decade and a half. We've seen a number of different models that try to help consumers monetize the value of their own data, make that value exchange more explicit by trading, you know, engaging them in finding the value in data, making explicit trade-offs with publishers, or, you know, even being able to monetize their travels around the web. Most of those models have failed for a lot of different reasons. Are we to a point, however, where the value of consumer data has become so explicit with consumers themselves that we're going to start seeing some of those models come out where there are much more explicit exchanges of value of my attention for, you know, for my attention for your ad, for your content, or even being able to monetize my value as a consumer across a lot of different sites, a lot of different mechanisms that allow us to do that. Is it now time for that? Or is it still something people really don't want to be bothered managing their own data or even monetizing the pennies they might be able to make off of it?
Yeah, I'll take a first crack at that. I think that to a large extent, people are at the point, I think you talked about the kind of erosion of privacy and the larger acceptance of our data sharing across the board. People are at the point where they're pretty comfortable sharing data, but they're very cognizant of what that value exchange is. And I think people are really uncomfortable when the value exchange is for something that's not related to the data. So like, I'm not going to give you data to get a premium article, but I might give you data to give me a very relevant video or something like that. So I think that the important thing there is connecting the act of giving data or consenting to data to an immediate response that is felt by the consumer in a positive way. So I think in the past the problem has been, you might give your data to whatever, to the wind and the internet, and you're going to see no measurable impact on the banner ads that you're seeing or whatever it may be. Plenty of people have your data, but because of the fragmentation of the industry, like, you're going to see repeat ads and all of that stuff. And so the important thing is the connection between, when I give my data, will that actually impact something for me? And I think we're getting to the point where that's possible. And I think people feel that on Facebook for sure.
So their data attention span is as limited as their media attention span. It's got to be immediate and explicit, and the exchange needs to be as explicit.
I mean, it can't be a 5% increase over the course of 3 months, right? It needs to be 100% tomorrow.
Right.
But I would say, like, I'm just kind of thinking about this. Like, if as a consumer, there's so much data being collected on me. Like, it's kind of scary not to manage your own data profile, right? And really sort of what is that explicit permission you're giving, and what's that ecosystem? I mean, you think about like a Nest. Like, my Nest knows, well, I think it knows, like, when I'm hot or cold or when I get home or not, like, which is cool, which helps me. But like, that data is being sold to like the ADT person down the street who's coming in to sell me security. Like, I don't know if I'm cool with that. Like, maybe I am, but I should probably manage that as a consumer. I don't know if it's my responsibility to manage it, but I would think it probably is personal responsibility. Just don't know how to do that.
I think when I think Alan mentioned it earlier in your talk, but when IoT really proliferates and we have all these things tracking so many things of our lives, I think we have an implicit understanding that our mobile device knows a shocking amount about you, but it's sort of like within the carrier, and they're sort of taking care of it on some level. But when you connect up all these sensors that are going to exist in your life, I think that's going to raise a whole different privacy question of, like, where does all that data go? So it's different than advertising.
I forget who said it earlier. I just think part of the key is that advertisers have to be willing to pay to advertise on quality content. Right. And I think the publishing world has to start to move away from this race to the bottom clickbait world where you're just looking to get as many clicks as you can because your advertiser's only willing to pay, a fraction of a penny per 1,000 clicks. And so it's sort of this chicken and egg thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But also the two great communicators among our institutions, the content providers, publishers, and advertisers have been incredibly bad at communicating the nature of the data exchange to their own consumers and being able to say, this is what we're giving in exchange for that, and being able to, Google does a very good job. I'm very willing to let Google have my location because I know it just saved me that much more time when I just did a search, because I know that the local results are going to float to the top. I can see it on my phone. And yet, in all of the different stages that we've seen over the last 10, 15 years, publishers and advertisers have both been abysmal at finding ways to communicate to the consumer, this is what we're giving you that's better. And to do it when they do it, to follow your point. You have to do it as it's being done.
Yeah, I think that's a big point, and I think a lot of people now are collecting data just for the belief that in the future that data will be valuable. And that's really where consumers are lost, because I could not feel more detached from why I would give you data to make your company more valuable in a potential future situation. And I think the Google example is really good in Google Now, of like, okay, I gave them my location data, they immediately told me what the weather is and how long it's going to take me to get home. So that connection is really tight.
And Netflix and Amazon, you're seeing the feedback almost immediately in the recommendations. You're seeing the stuff that you just searched for is somehow, or the things you just chose, are now informing that whole mechanism. So that constant feedback loop is there. They're always telling you, even implicitly, that this is how your data is helping you.
I agree, and we all love to point to those examples, Amazon being another one. But Tide doesn't lend itself, or Coke doesn't even really lend itself as much to the immediate gratification or the use of data to help enhance your Coke-related experience, and that's part of the challenge.
Well, or they just haven't thought. It hasn't occurred to us yet how to do it. We see those are held out, and those are the easy examples. Yes,
you're
because
always
they
an
have
optimist.
mechanisms, but I think part of what we're talking about here is the Tides and the Cokes have to think a little more creatively about how to mimic that effect, because they've never been asked to before.
Yeah, I think the big thing there is like, what data does Coke need, right? Like, what data does Coke need to give you that great experience? It probably isn't like where you work, right? That may be helpful right now in their algorithm, but there's another way to get to that answer. And I think that's what you're getting at, is this creative way of connecting the data to something actually concrete.
Well, I hope so. But as you said, I'm optimistic.
Yeah, I didn't even need the mic, but I think the Tide and the Coke example, there are ways. These are
We want to get you on the record.
We're filming this, brother.
Hello,
Yeah.
hello, hello.
Is this going out?
I'm with New Star, so I'm a sponsor here. But I think there are ways that data can be used to inform and benefit a consumer. Coke and Tide are portfolio companies, right? I mean, they have a lot of different products. Think about Clorox as another one. I think Clorox is probably a really good example of a CPG that could then provide, based on household data, and New Star's a household data provider, the ability to, with a, if you have children, to inform an advertising experience that is based on a product, and then they're delivering you product suggestions, or they're showcasing products that green works for, disinfecting for, your house or whatever, that are focused on families as opposed to single millennials. Same thing with Coke. That's a portfolio company. It may be around, around sending a Coke message, but it also could be around sending a message around some other product that is more healthy or whatever. And there's lots of data out there that could inform something like that and then provide the user with a better experience, I would think, in terms of the ad.
But I would say if I really like Coke, if I'm like a passionate Coke, I would be okay with them getting my data. I think you do have some brands like that out there that you would be okay giving your data to for whatever reason. I think that does exist. I think there's a lot of brands you just...
Yeah, but I think that's an excellent point, that we're dealing with a lot of, both from the publisher level and the brand level, a lot of multinationals that have a whole range of services that could be offered up in exchange. Clorox may not have that direct value, or Coke may not have that direct value, but they have a sister company that does. And that they could start offering these other things. To some degree, that's what John Rocco was talking about this with San Francisco Chronicle, is is that we have these other things that we can offer you that, that can sweeten the deal, that may be more relevant to you than just, say, a coupon from Coke. But I mean, that's what I mean by this kind of more creative engagement with what kind of value can be funneled over to the consumer in exchange for the data.
Yeah, no, not to end it on a pessimistic tone, but the reality is that journalism is very expensive and doesn't pay well, and advocacy is real cheap and pays pretty well. On that note, everybody, let's grab a beer.
All right, we are Alan panel. Thanks very much for having us.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve.
I think it was Alex, and a good place to end is a lot of the things that we've talked about today. We've been spinning out towards 2021 and what needs to be done and the future that we envision. I think Alexander's point was excellent, that it takes courage, it takes real leaders, people who will get in front and actually say, this is where we're going to move forward, and it's going to be at the brand level and at the publisher level to take that leadership. I hope you enjoyed this day, this sort of experiment in spinning forward on where we'll be in 2021. We're doing actually this exact same show in Boston in 2 weeks. We're doing a West Coast and an East Coast version. If you have any friends over in the Boston area, lead them over to our site online, and we'll be in Boston on the 20th. Again, I'd like to thank all of our speakers today and moderators for the good work that they did. Our sponsors, both New Star, our lunchtime sponsor, and Gum Gum, our Wi-Fi sponsor, for their support. Thanks to all of you for sticking towards the end. And as I said, you can see anything that you missed today or you want to push to somebody else. The videos will be online by tomorrow. So thanks, everybody, for coming.
Yeah, and thanks to Steve Smith, Joe Mandizzi, and Ross Fadner for a great program. Thanks, guys.